Hey there, friends and enemies, JoPa here again, and the biggest question that I've been asked the most with the First Descendant is which characters and weapons you should be chasing first, whether you decide to pay real money or ultimately farm for materials to craft them. There is a important decision to make because you do want to spend your time and money wisely. And there are some characters that might be OP, but will be very frustrating to farm for everything to make the perfect build. However, there are some descendants that, if you have them on your squad, can just make your entire account better, can make everything easier for you ultimately in order to make the game just a lot smoother and really drop down some of that terrible RNG that can be a frustrating experience at times. Same thing for the weapons. There are a couple of them that I feel like are universally great and everyone should have in their arsenal. So, first off, let's talk about the descendants. One that I initially found completely underwhelming, but I think now is actually insane, is Sharon. Now, she is good for a variety of reasons. You can make different builds with her that are really, really strong. However, I do think ultimately at this point in the game, pretty much every character has builds that are insane and can beat the majority of bosses. So you really don't have to worry about it if you have a specific build that you want to ultimately create. However, she also has another benefit of where she can consistently revive allies who get themselves into trouble. I find that if you're playing with a bunny or a glass cannon character who is just running into battle all the time and then getting down, they can waste lives. And if you're doing something like one of the horde modes, or if you're doing one of the dungeons and you have characters that are wasting lives, you can risk failing that mission unless you are able to revive them, and she's able to do so with ease regardless of whether they are surrounded, they're in the middle of danger. You can just go invisible, revive your teammates and get out of danger, and then rinse and repeat if necessary. You'll see later on in the gameplay, in this particular mission I was doing, I had to revive my teammates a ton of times. So that's really, really nice, especially if you like to play with randoms and play with friends who maybe their builds just quite aren't there yet and they're trying them out. Now, another benefit to her, and one that I think is significantly more important and useful no matter what your account looks like, is the fact that she is the only character currently in the game who can do the infiltration missions for the infiltration option for the recon mission. This opens up additional ways to earn amorphous materials and crafting items that are not otherwise obtainable. So if you aren't ready to face off against hard mode bosses quite yet, some of the drop chances for materials is significantly higher with these infiltration missions than they would be, say, with a regular boss battle. Some of those, the drop chance, I think, of a Spiral Catalyst might be 6% against a regular boss if you have that amorphous material, but with the infiltration option for the amorphous material, it's 36%. So having that ability to farm in a different way and do it completely solo, I think is absolutely valuable, and the reason why I think everyone should have Sharon. Plus, I do feel like her gameplay is a lot more fun than I initially gave her credit for. She's one of the few characters in the game who can really benefit from both snipers or shotguns, depending on which playstyle you want, especially with her ramp up of damage when she goes invisible. So there's a lot of different options there. I do think she's a good character, but even if you don't want to use her as one of your primary characters, you're just using her to farm for other characters or weapons that might improve your main descendant, she is incredibly valuable, and I think one that everybody should be targeting as early as possible. It's been a complete game changer since I've been using her more often. Another descendant who has a similar ability, but not to the same degree in my opinion, and his significance might get nerfed in a future package, not because he's going to be less valuable, but more because you're going to obtain more materials from some of these drops, so he's not quite as useful, is Enzo. Now, if you didn't know, Enzo can get additional materials and make farming the vaults, which do drop the materials, easier. So say you have to do several of the loops. If you didn't know, you have to essentially do a little mini game with these vaults, the encrypted vaults that drop materials. And Enzo just makes it so much easier because he has less rotations that he has to do in that limited amount of time. And that'll get you more materials much faster. But again, a lot of these materials, the drop rates of them is going to be increasing. There are other ways to farm them that we've found across the game. So that value might be a little bit less, and less so for sure than Sharon, in my opinion, when you are targeting certain types of amorphous material with Sharon. Enzo doesn't have that ability, but he is very, very useful. And he's another character that I think a lot of people were iffy about. I think he's going to be tremendous once the Mega Dungeon comes out. But also, I do think he is very valuable if you can build him correctly, not only as a solo player, but also in a team. Now, moving on to the weapons. This is where it gets a bit more interesting, and it's going to be somewhat dependent upon what character you are ultimately running. Now, the Thunder Cage is one of the best weapons in the game, and everyone can get it to drop. You will want to farm for additional copies of that, but the Thunder Cage is pretty universally great and very useful if you do have Sharon, if you do have Bunny, which pretty much everyone will get. Very, very valuable. Highly recommend using that consistently. Craft it as soon as reasonably possible. But the other weapon that I think a lot more people should be running, especially if you run anything that involves toxic or non-attribute, and this is a good one if you're running Ajax or Glay or someone of that nature, the Python. I think this is one of, if not the best weapons in the game, in my own personal opinion. A lot of people, I feel like, underrate it, but I feel like it is incredibly useful. And the nice thing is, if you do have Sharon, farming for the materials for the Python is incredibly easy. Once you get some of these amorphous materials, the drop rates for the Python, for example, the Python blueprint is like 36% or something like that. So it'll only take you a couple runs, and I think that's really, really good. Now, another one that I think people sleep on that is pretty good universally, and I think ultimately one that I just haven't seen a lot of people talk about, but I think would be valuable across a lot of different accounts, is the Enduring Legacy. Now, this one talks about burned enemies quite a bit, but since a lot of people have Lepic as their main character, it's going to come in handy. You can also run this with a Blair, obviously, to great effect. I think Enduring Legacy is one of the more underrated weapons in the entire game, and a lot of people, maybe I just haven't seen enough people talking about it. Maybe it is regarded that well, but I think it is very, very good overall. And yeah, those are the two that I would absolutely be trying to farm as soon as possible. Some of the other weapons I think are fine, but not all of the craftable ultimate weapons stand out in my mind. Some of them are pretty average. If you want to farm for one of the sniper rifles like Afterglow Sword for your Sharon, for example, feel free to do so. But I just think there are certain weapons like the Python, like the Enduring Legacy, that can be very good regardless of the rest of your build. And so that's why I would recommend farming for them first, because even as you decide to change characters, even as you decide that you want to try different builds, they will be valuable across multiple different options. So that's just my own personal preference. If you have a weapon that you think I've underrated or you think would be really good across multiple different characters and builds, let me know. There's other Descendants that you think would be more valuable than the ones that I mentioned as like a kind of a universal thing, not taking into account min-maxing your builds and everything like that. Let me know in the comments. I know Valby is incredible right now for farming, so she's definitely one to obtain, but they already mentioned that it'll be easier to farm other locations in the future, so she might not be, again, quite as valuable as some of the others. Love to hear from you guys. Let me know in the comments down below. My name is JoPa. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you want to see more of the First Descendant content from me, hit the like button, subscribe, all that kind of good stuff. Have a good one. I'll catch you all later.